everybody. So I'm Marcy and welcome to my home. I'd like to invite you in, Sarah, Piper, Randy, and Luke. Come on in, have a seat. You've all been here before. Let's have a conversation. Let's have some tea. We're here in the house that my father built. And we live on Lake Burien, which is just south of Seattle, on the ancestral land of the Duwamish people. So welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, it's so nice to be in your living room.
It's so nice to have you in my living room. I miss you all so much. Really, I feel like I'm just gonna cry for a minute.
I just saw Luke's face and all of you guys together and Randy and your house, and I just was like, oh my God, I have to go get my tissues now. I just started I want to burst in tears. Yeah, already.
It's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Filled with love.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, yeah. So yeah, and I've already felt lots of tears this morning and tears of joy of riding the waves of stories. So it's nice to sort of land for a minute in Marcy's living room with you guys and all the people watching. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from Randy and Luke and the sense of the tenderness that they're going to share, because I got the pleasure of getting some preview of reading a bit of the writing that they're going to share some of that today. And so, and like for me, tenderness is such a key part of narrative work. And, I had the honor of working with Michael White for 11 years and traveling. Some of you might know me from selling the books with him. And, Michael was such a tender man. And, so it was really great to I got to marinate in his tenderness for so many years. And I'm hoping, I think some of that soaked into me a bit and added to my love of tenderness. And, the day that one of the last workshops I saw with him, that's how he described the work that he did. He said, this is a tender therapy. And that has just stayed with me. And that's so important. And so, yeah, I've been feeling that over these last many hours that I've got to catch of this story-a-thon, of like the tenderness of all these stories and all these people. So yeah, I'm really happy to be with you here today.
Nice.
Thanks, Sarah. Piper, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So I am excited about today and everyone that's here because of like my idea of and relating to tender therapy is like the phrase of relational revolution. And Luke and I, back in grad school, he was a really big part of kind of this radical concept of a relational revolution. And that being, I tried to figure out how I wanted to sit here and start here today. And when I was reading Randy's love letter to his client, there was this as he'll read it, is just this idea of keeping kind of, how can I keep a close connection to the ways that I want to be here today? And I thought of like my kid self and holding that inside. So I decided to like be inside my kid's room. This is my son Nico's room, and there's lights everywhere, and he has this really cool spaceship bed and some like star blinds, and I just thought it would be more playful to be in here. And when I just wanted to read one thing that Luke wrote in his paper about a loving social work practice, and why I believe in a relational revolution that I came to because it transformed my life. And that came through Marcy and her work in narrative therapy, and it changed me. And then I brought it to grad school, and Luke captured it here. If everyone had just one single person in his life who says, "I will love you," this is Biscaglia, a quote, "I will love you no matter what. I will love you if you're stupid, if you slip and fall on your face, if you do the wrong thing, if you make mistakes, if you behave like a human being. I will love you no matter." Then we'll never end up in mental institutions. And so I think that a loving practice is the thing that will change. It's the radical action against racism, classism, sexism, and similarly abusive discourses. And it is the very stuff that I believe will change the world one person at a time. And so it's everything that I believe in. And I'm so grateful to be amongst people that share this today.
Thank you, Piper. Thank you, Sarah, for helping to set a context. Sarah, Piper, and I have talked on and off for a while, and one of the connections we really made is around this idea of tender therapy and relational revolution. And so when we were figuring out how we wanted this to go, we thought, well, you know, it's a little stressful being in front of an audience and all that. Then we decided, no, we're just going to be together in my living room, and we're going to talk about what's important and what matters. And so when it came time to think about who we would invite to be storytellers, of course we would have invited each other. So we thought, okay, well, if it's not going to be the three of us, who would it be? And so Luke Quinn and Randy Nelson came to mind. And they came to mind for specific reasons. And I think we'll start with Luke today. And so what we did was we asked Luke if he would read some excerpts from the paper that he wrote as his final project in the Masters of Social Work program at the University of Vermont. And I met Luke. This was almost exactly 12 years ago, right, Luke? About 12 years ago. I met you the year before because I came to visit Piper, and you guys were in the program together. So I met you. And then I came back the next year at the end of your program. And I happened to get there just in time to be able to witness you presenting your final project paper. And what I remember was I didn't know you very well. And I kind of was feeling awkward in this room with people I didn't know. And I sat down and trying to kind of act like I knew what I was doing. And you started to speak about your paper. And I started sobbing and pretty much sobbed through the whole thing in front of a bunch of people I had never met before. And so when we got talking about tenderness and relational revolution in our work, you came to mind, Luke. And so I would like to invite Luke now to tell us a story. It, I think, is a story about following a question. And instead of an answer to a question, Luke found an additional question. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
So take it away, Luke.
Well, it's so good to be in your living room, Marcy. I and I know everyone on this call spent so many hours sitting on the couch across from you. And that sounds so therapeutic to say, sitting on the couch across from you, but in many ways it was. and just looking at all the items behind you, I think of how I've like looked at every single detail of all those objects for so many hours, especially when I couldn't make eye contact anymore with you. And I was just like, and I remember there used to be that beautiful piece of Aboriginal art behind you, which is now on the other wall, but with the, I think they're honey ants, is that?
Yes, that's right.
And I would just like stare at that and look at the sort of symmetry and the slight lack of symmetry. Like, I just feel like I've stared at some of those pieces for so long. It feels so good to be in your space where I haven't been obviously for a while now. Yeah, when you asked me to read this paper again, I think I probably hadn't read it in full in 12 years. Every time I would move, I'd find it among the boxes as I would pack up, and I'd read like a little piece, but I really don't think I'd ever read the whole thing. And in looking back on it, I just want to, I know a lot of this paper is built on and is credit to Piper and things I learned from her during grad school. And I know much of her life is built on her relationship with you, Marcy, and so many other people that have influenced both of you. So I just really want to credit everyone who's influenced me and all of our ancestors who've led, to this moment. And thank you, Marcy, for acknowledging the land we're on here in Seattle on Duwamish land. And I hope we're all like caring for this land and in the future that we hold in our hands. And as I reread the paper, I felt like the story of this storytelling is more of like my experience of rereading this paper 12 years later. And in some ways acknowledging like, so for about 10 years after grad school, I did direct service. I worked for Early Head Start with families in their homes. And that was probably exactly the kind of person that the person who wrote that paper wanted me to be. And then in the last couple of years, I work, now I work in sort of managerial positions. I work for local government in a much more administrative role. And I'm probably exactly the kind of person that person 12 years ago would have called a sellout. But I don't exactly feel that way anymore, probably for self-preservation reasons. But it was, it was very, I feel good about rereading it. I don't actually feel like a sellout, but it was a good reminder to think about how to bring these practices into new and different roles in my life. So to give a little, I'm going to read a few excerpts from the paper just to give a sense of it. So I'm going to read the abstract and then a few different paragraphs. And then maybe you all can help me reflect a little bit.
Okay.
Dear reader, professional and scholarly literature on love within the social work relationship is paltry at best. Constructions of love as irrational, unacademic, sexual, and feminine explain its absence from a field increasingly concerned with legitimacy and professionalism. Still, I find it odd that a profession committed to working with people in their environment is silent on a subject our culture constructs as fundamental to our lives. My interest began with the query of a fellow classmate. Can we love those traditionally referred to as clients? During my search for love in the social work classroom, field, and literature, I came across the "what would love do" question. My purpose is not to provide a definitive answer to what love would do. Instead, I venture merely to spark consideration among social workers. Herein, I detail my own tentative, loving social work practice, as well as the thoughts of 4 practicing social workers on the subject. I conceptualize my loving social work practice as opening space for the other. Though during my literature review and collaborative interviews, it is revealed that perhaps the "what would love do" question is limiting in scope. An emphasis on being over doing now seems more in line with my understanding of love. Whatever the emphasis, I believe the pursuit of love in social work holds transformative potential for direct as well as non-direct practice, and therefore should be considered within the profession. What do you think? Love, Luke. And my paper begins. Calvin was running around the playscape, crossing the bridge between the 2 main structures when he turned to look right at me. "I love you," he said, and time stood still. The dog stopped barking, the voices of the other children faded, the wood chips ceased to hurt my bare feet, and the sunshine brightened our faces. I, a few feet from the playscape, quickly recovered and managed, "I love you too, Calvin." Occurring during the summer between my first and second years of graduate school, this moment came near the beginning of my exploration of love in social work, a loving social work practice. Calvin was 3 at the time. It is easier and more acceptable for me to express my love for him, my love for his mother and father, or the other individuals and families who I've encountered and loved as a social work student, on the other hand, seems a more complicated matter. Stanley Whitkin and Gerald de Montigny refer to humor and play, respectively, as dangerous discourses in social work. My interpretation of this is that they are dangerous to those engaged in them because they are dangerous to the establishment. I believe love to be another dangerous discourse, important to pursue precisely because it is dangerous to institutional structures, as well as for its transformative potential in our lives. To some extent, I see the pursuit of love as a personal and global anti-loneliness practice, much in the way Umberto Maturana calls love the only transcendence of our individual loneliness. From research into my life story, I believe my exploration of and search for love grew out of the loneliness of being a non-traditional male. Qualities that I now cherish left me insecure and eventually led to my dropping out of engineering school. During the several years of loneliness, depression, and transition to a preferred direction in life, I opened up to the part of me hidden by societal expectations. A decision to hug more led me on a road to bring love into all aspects of my life. My choice to begin with the loneliness in the previous paragraph is an example, I believe, of my succumbing to the problem focus dominating our culture. As I write, I wonder what Michael White might have asked in searching for the absent but implicit in my story. How did you know what was missing? How did you recognize love, he might reflect. The implication being that I would not have even known what decisions to make if love was actually absent from my life. A question like this opens up a preferred storyline filled with love, whereas the culturally imposed dominant story ignored love. In the end, it was not in the literature that I found the answer to my research. It was because I was piqued to notice love that I heard the "What would love do?" question shared by a professor in reference to her practices as a social worker in person. The answer I was searching for turned out to be another question. This is not just another research question, however, because it is the end and beginning of my search at the same time. My immediate response to the question of what would love do in social work is that love would make room for the other, inspired by Carl Tom's formulation of therapeutic loving and therapeutic violence as ethical postures. Borrowing from Umberto Maturana's work, Tom defines love as opening space for the existence of the other, as opposed to violence and imposition of one's will upon the other, which closes space. John Wellwood agrees. Openness, the heart's pure, unconditional yes, is love's essence. At the most basic level, loving social work practice for me opens space. I think just a couple other reflections on thinking like where I've been. I remember when I was in graduate school in my practicum, I was experimenting with like signing letters and emails with love. And I remember one of my practicum instructors, like, she didn't come to me, but she came to somebody else and was like, does Luke do that with other, like, I don't know, it was like, you know, that sort of dangerous idea of that. And I thought back to like, I think maybe I did that like once after I became a professional social worker and then never again. And I don't think I'll start doing it, but I was just, I don't know, just like thinking about how times have changed, or like how, I don't know, like where my, where I wanted to put up the fight, maybe. And also thinking about where, like, I feel like love has become a little less central to my practice. And I've been thinking back on like what replaced it and what I can relearn by bringing it back in. So I think in these past 12 years, I've probably, it seems wrong to say replace, but I've become much more focused on like an anti-racist practice. And I don't think I've formulated that as a loving practice as much, which I think this has made me think back and to reconsider. But it's been a bit more in some ways like a hard approach, you know, which I think sometimes racism and structures like that take, but it hasn't always been as loving, at least even loving to myself. And I've been doing a lot of reading recently about racial identity development and this idea of like finding pride in one's racial identity. So as a white man, that idea is almost scary to me, you know, like it's hard to think about pride and power as a white person and not think of white power and white pride. But there's really something missing when you can't find some core source of power deep inside of you based on your identity. And I don't know, I think reading back on this paper, I think this might show me a bit of a path towards finding that as I move forward and try to sort of redefine my identity. So I just really appreciate you, Marcy, for asking me to reread this, because I don't think I would have otherwise.
Thanks, Luke. You know, there's so much in reading the paper again and thinking about the years that have passed, and so much that captured my attention. I just want to highlight a couple of things, if I could. Is that okay? Especially for people listening who haven't had a chance to read your paper, that just to say again that that the paper is about what would love do, and that was the question. So what would love do in a loving social work practice? And I just want to also say that we didn't describe in your introduction that you were involved with Peggy Sachs and her collaboratory. And in fact, you're in the book she wrote about reauthoring teaching, or the collection of papers and comments from people. So you did have a background in narrative ideas going into your paper, and that you're in a grad program where social constructionism was a theme of the program.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So anyway, so what would love do? I guess I have one question that keeps coming to mind to me. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay. Probably depends on the question, right? But I'm wondering, I have a whole page of notes to refer to, but the one thing that sticks out to me is love is a personal and global anti-loneliness practice in the face of social isolation in this pandemic and social distancing. I'm really touched by the notion about anti-loneliness practices. But even more than that, what really sparked my spirit was the question in your paper about examining various practices of social work or therapy, community work, and asking the question, does this practice love? Does this practice itself love? And then one response might be, this practice loves because it honors the people who bring their stories to me. So I thought, wow, that's a great place for me to be. In the question is, you know, are these practices I'm using, do they love? And how do they love? So my question for you really was, what has love done? You know, what would love do was your question 12 years ago. I'd like to ask you what love has done in 12 years.
Wow. Let me think for a second. I think, to not immediately answer the question, I'm thinking about, like, have I asked I honestly don't know if I've asked myself that question since writing this paper. And it was one of my notes that I wrote down of, like, I need to start using that question, because I feel like I have gotten wrapped up and again, I think this is important, but like, is this practice anti-oppressive? Is this practice anti-racist? And I've really focused on that. But obviously all those things are loving. I think it was maybe wrong to somewhat separate them. in my practice and in my life. And I don't think I have entirely, but I don't know if it's brought to mind. I do still use that definition of love as opening space quite often. Like that comes up. I find like myself referencing that a lot and thinking about that a lot. And I think that is like an anti-racist practice, right? Opening space uh, for everyone, for the other, for everyone, for like our preferred storylines, and that we can bring our full selves to our work or to this life. I think what has love done for me is I think mainly I would say like self-love is probably the work of these last 12 years of my life. And I think if I had to rewrite this paper, rethink it, I think it was very externally focused. And I think I even made it acknowledge that towards the end of the paper. But I think I needed to love myself a lot more. And I don't think I've fully reached that point yet, but I think I was speaking to that a little bit. Rereading this paper is actually somewhat helpful in that process. I think only recently have I realized I need to figure out what about myself I love, and that I will be better for it, and like my interactions with others will be better for it. Like the people I love will be better off when I fully love myself.
I thank you for responding to that. I need to say, regardless of who else is listening in, how much I love you, Luke.
Love you too, Marcy.
Yeah. So we have just a few more minutes, unfortunately, but how about others?
Marcy, I just wanted to ask you a question first, if I may.
Sure.
That day that you went to University of Vermont and you had met Luke and he started to read his paper, and you had heard about him through me, but you just got there, you had flown in and you were plopped in the middle of the seminar of us reading our thesis papers. And when Luke began to read and you said you burst into tears, I'm really curious about what those tears were expressing, or what might some of the things be expressing in your tears at that time. Do you remember?
Well, I think part of it was, being of a social worker of another generation. I had never heard, I'm going to cry when I just say this, but I had never heard a privileged white male get up in front of an audience and talk about loving their clients. And I had been secretly loving every single one of my clients my entire life, and hiding that because of the tyranny of some discourse of professionalism. And they were tears of sadness and grief. They were tears of immense love and pride in the courage that I imagined it would take for Luke to speak so confidently and loudly about his intention to embrace loving the people who consult with him. It was a really powerful moment for me, and there was a lot more to that, but that's the shorthand response.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's so much to say, and I can't say it all, and I can't ask it all. So when you said that, Marcy, of how you responded that day with Luke, is how I felt when Luke was going to read his paper, potentially. And Luke, you said that 12 years ago, you haven't read it for 12 years. And I remember I hadn't ever read it completely. And then to go back 12 years to that time that we were in, I didn't read any of it when I was going through it the other day. I just burst into tears. And the whole time I was like, it was a lot of different emotions, but I was like, yes, like I had my like guns up. I was like, yes, this is it. I reading your paper was being loved. The way that you wrote it was an invitation into open space. Just ask these sweet questions and thoughtful questions, and you're playful, and there is so much tyranny of professionalism that like moved around our grad school because we were moving against things that were it's definitely like a counter approach to therapy in the social work school that we were in. And I just felt like there was so much surveillance that swarmed our program. And I've, you said, Luke, that you've been kind of hardened over the years a little bit. And I would say that I have too, just from Marcy, you're saying just these professional discourses. And when I read your paper, it brought me back to that reason why I believed in a relational revolution. And I remember Calvin and the little boy that you spoke of very, 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 very much. And I just remember him. He was 3, and he, when anybody would come near his house, he would just flip them off, just he would let anybody in. And he would just take both of them out of his pants, and then he would like put down his pants. He was like, fuck you, world, fuck you. And then, but there was a way that Luke was with him, that he loved Luke and he trusted him. And I'm losing my thoughts because there's a lot. But basically that I feel like I have a voice again of what I stand for, Luke, and that's you helped me through the whole program keep my beliefs alive. And I was crucified for them at times, but I would just look over at you. Just like I did today. And you just smile. And you make me feel like that makes sense. And I know that I do, and I'm carrying you with me. I'm gonna carry your paper with me wherever I go. And when I'm feeling like I don't make sense, I'm gonna read it, and then I get mad and angry, and I'm gonna continue to fight. Because I know you're there. And you're like the smartest person I've ever known in my life. And so I know that when people make me feel like I'm stupid, that I'm not.
Yeah.
So thankful for you and what you stand for in this world. And I really am, I'm really rooting behind you to feel that love for you. And I'm so curious about what is going to make that possible when you feel it, and what is made possible when you feel that.
And I hope, no, and I hope you know, Piper, that I wouldn't have written that paper without you. I wouldn't have had the courage to say those things and take that stance without you. So I carry you with me every day in that too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wow. Oops, I have a little dog here that's going crazy. I hate to interrupt, but I think we're going to need to shift. Is it okay?
Can I just say one thing before
Yeah,
we
you.
time? But there's just something kind of I just want to thank Luke for. because I just really love the story of him going back and how the rereading of the paper, and then talking about how it's helping him in loving himself. And it just switched something in me when I connected that to his definition of love as opening space. Because I was, I get stuck sometimes in this sort of oppressive idea that we have to love ourselves and self-love, and you have to love yourself before you can love others. And sometimes it just feels like I really fight against that. So part of my revolution, I guess, is like, oh wait, if I look at that through the definition of love as opening space, and I'm opening space for myself, that feels so much better. So I just want to thank you for that, Luke.
Oh, openings. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to check in, Randy. Any thoughts you want to share before we move?
Yeah. And prior to this and reading your paper, I don't know you at all, Luke.
Yeah, Randy, this is Luke. Luke, this is.
It says his name right there.
Hi, Randy.
Good.
I may have misheard, and it was in the paper, I guess, too, but you said in there's just this phrase of peaked to notice love, and I guess that really stands out to me. And it seems like maybe it's something that you'd like to, or thinking about reconnecting with a bit. Is this like, I was thinking of it as kind of like a calibration, I guess, that like, and I think for me, certainly part of just like this experience during the coronavirus, and also as a person who works in community mental health, like I can very quickly get oriented to like what I don't want and what is problematic, and ultimately kind of calibrate myself to that. And I think that's valuable. I don't want to turn that off, but I like the idea sort of like peaking oneself to notice love, to just like maintain a bit of a radar for preference, I suppose. So thank you for that. And I think certainly like this morning I'm having my daughters were looking at me, I'm in the garage. But had some hard conversations about what we can't do this morning, really. And I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish about this all, but like it's nice to just reorient myself to like what is possible, like waving at your daughters on the deck, even though they can't play with a little boy across the street.
That resonates. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you very much.
Wow. So we're going to shift, I think, now so that we have time to hear what Randy's wanting to speak of. But I just want to say thanks again to Luke for sharing his paper with us all these years later. And I just want to apologize if your arm hurts a little from me twisting it to encourage you to do it. But it sounds like maybe it's been worthwhile for you as well as certainly for all of us. So thanks again for that. One of the things in your paper, in Luke's paper, he had all these beautiful quotes, and several of the quotes are from the writings of Leo Buscaglia. And I don't know how many people know Leo Buscaglia and his work about love, but I had the very great fortune to spend a little time with Leo before he passed away. And Leo was a big hugger. Leo would come do workshops, and he would stand at the door at the end of the workshop and hug every single person as they left the room. And this was quite extraordinary during the times in the 70s. People kind of either really liked him or thought he was crazy. But he talked about love all the time. And when Luke quoted Leo Buscaglia, that was another really profound connection for me with Luke's ways of bringing love into his social work practice. So one of the quotes from Leo Buscaglia was, "Listening is love in action." And in Luke's paper, he says that perhaps in this way, social work is at times love in practice, or to quote Morley and Ive, social work is in the business of love. Now, this connected right up with the letter that you're going to read for us. So I was really struck. I thought there was just a connection because you were a couple of white dudes talking about love. And then
I'm glowing white too.
I'm white today.
Yeah, it's like halo over you.
I know, yeah, you're looking a little holy there, Randy. So
Sorry about that.
we know you way better than that. So anyway, I thought about this connection about, you know, that we're in the business of love. So I would like to introduce Randy Nelson. And Randy, you did mention you work in community mental health and work at, do you want to say something about where you work?
Sure, I work at Harborview, which is like, it's part of the University of Washington, but it's also just like the public hospital of Seattle. I work in an outpatient mental health clinic. And now that I think about it, I think we have talked to Luke on the phone. But I've worked there for about 11 years in kind of a capacity sort of between case management and counselor. I am not technically a social worker, but essentially a social worker. And I'm certainly someone who's been enamored with narrative ideas and was largely exposed to them through Marcy's invitations and guidance, definitely. And just, yeah. And I was an English major before I was interested in this kind of stuff. And so the sort of the embrace of language and just maybe even the tenderness, I guess, for language and the specificity that's part of narrative really appeals to me. And while I don't do it as much as I would like I write letters to clients sometimes, and yeah, and Marcy has read several of them, and sort of collaboratively chose one maybe to read today. Is that a fine enough introduction, I guess?
I think that's
Randy, you have like the same sweetness as Luke.
I know.
I just can't even handle it.
He's just a bucket of emotion here.
Just can't even handle watching you. Okay, keep going on. I'm sorry.
I think this desire to like share the screen so people can see the words, but I think that kind of like blots out all of you. Like, I don't know how you feel about that. Should I just read or should I show words and read?
It might be helpful if people can see your letter.
I think so too. I'm going to share my screen real quick then. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll try to, your heads are in the way for me, so I'll try to scroll along appropriately. So this is a letter I obviously wrote September 12th, 2017 to a person I'm calling Cole. They'd given me permission to share the letter at the time, but I've subsequently haven't had lots of contact with them, and so I've changed some things. Yeah, and this was, I'm just gonna read it. Dear Cole, thank you for coming in to see me today. Whenever I see you, you say so many creative, powerful, and healthy things that I often end up taking lots of notes. In reflecting on these notes, I'm consistently struck by some idea or knowledge or quality that I want to help celebrate. This letter is intended to capture some of your wisdom in text and perhaps prompt a bit more of your wise wondering. I'm also drawn to your metaphors of being water together and intentionally filling the jugs of other from your own fixed supply. While it feels lofty, I'm hoping I can provide some small degree of being water for you. May this letter add a small something to your jug. If nothing else, maybe these words or the intention behind them can at least return a portion of the water that you graciously share with me in your persistence, creativity, and candor. Oh, why can't I sorry about that for some reason. I mean, maybe my Zoom prowess is not, oh, here we go. There we go. I came to fully realize today that you and I are both in the love business. Perhaps this explains some of the persistent collegial feelings I experience in our conversations. Tears came to me as you spoke. These were tears of admittedly naive solidarity and tears of admiration of your craft and commitment to loving. I feel like I have this calling to love people who can't readily accept or return love, you said. I'm wondering how you kept yourself open to hearing this call, especially amidst the noise of strong, scrappy living. What led you to accept rather than reject or ignore this call of cumbersome loving? You shared compassion to suffer with as a cardinal value. You specifically discussed valued and loving ways of being with Dallas, not asking questions when he doesn't want to answer questions, assuring there's no need to explain yourself, creating a space for feeling safe, feeling however you're going to feel with someone. Patience is a lot of it, you said. Thank you for so clearly articulating these actions of compassion. As a lover of others, I sometimes get caught up in trying to do something. I plan to hold your acts of compassionate being close in my own endeavor to suffer with others. Is it okay that I'm learning from you? Knowing that I benefit from knowing you, how can we best assure that our relationship and conversations adequately center you? Given that loving others and compassion are such a big part of who you are, it's understandable that you sometimes feel lost when alone. This got me to wondering if there might be some others that you carry with you, even when you appear to be alone. There's a conversation always going in my head, you said, between a grown-up and the little kid. You explained why it's important to hold these internalized other selves close. The kid allows you to stay in touch with vital stuff I never lost about being a kid, being in wonder, your artistic self, curiosity, questing. The adult provides a sense of constancy that provides safety and permanency for the child. I'm wondering if we could somehow enhance connections between you and the adult and the kid. In what ways do you, or might you, love and suffer with these inside selves? If you could be water together with them, what difference might that make in your life? Part of me kind of wants to interview the inner adult and the inner kid. I'd be curious to ask the inner adult. When you look at the kid, a self-reflection, what do you see in the kid that suggests that your strength and consistency have been there in some form all along? Is there some small piece of you that you see in the kid? I'd like to ask the kid, what does it say to you that Cole has been so intentional about valuing your kidness? A lot of adults grow out of wonder, art, curiosity, and questing. What do you think it says about Cole that they've intentionally grown into wonder, art, curiosity, and questing? Cole, I guess I should ask you, is this all too weird and conceptual to be of help? Do you have other thoughts about bringing compassionate companionship into alone times? If Cole is a person who has trouble accepting love, how might you still make your love known to Cole? I guess that's all I have for now. I look forward to seeing you on the 27th. Sincerely, Randy. Unshare.
Wow.
It's funny as I was thinking about like, what's the story kind of, and I'm cognizant that stories don't need to like, you know, be wildly linear or even very plot driven, I suppose. Like there was, and I had asked Marcy like, oh, what do you think I should potentially read? And you had suggested a few things. So like, oh yeah, those would be appropriate things. I was cognizant that I didn't really remember kind of like delivering this letter or like what happened. And so because I work at the same place and like still have some degree of relationship with this person who candidly doesn't really need me much anymore. I looked back to see like, oh, what did they say in response? What was their next appointment? And then like, we didn't see each other for like 5 months or something, which is, so I don't know, it was just kind of an interesting thing as to like, oh, that's, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what to, but I would like to be able to say like, I read this and then this happened and that happened. This is the conversation we had. But I think in reality, probably I sent this and Cole read it probably. And then we saw each other like months and months later when probably something else was going on. So,
Randy, can I make a comment?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So thanks so much for sharing that with us. Because for me, that just reminded me like it kind of just brought forth more creative ways of being with people, and like that's really important to me to kind of creatively connect. But then I liked how you always check in, like, is this okay if I, you know, I'm kind of going out there, but but I love that. So it just, and that idea you talked about of wanting to celebrate some of Cole's ways, and that just resonated with me too. And then I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the idea of being water together. Like, I just love that phrase, and it just, for me, like that attunement that we get in, it was what I kind of took from it. But I just wanted to hear more about what maybe you and Cole, sounds like you kind of collaborated on that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it was definitely more Cole's idea, and maybe my thoughts about it now are kind of my idea. But I like it too, and I know Cole talked about jugs, and so I guess there's this hopeful image I have that we sort of, I don't know, are these separate jugs, I suppose, like full of water, and then kind of pour ourselves into this mutual space where, like, you know, understandably, like, there are no barriers or boundaries, I guess, in water. And so there is this kind of intermingling that happens. And then candidly, then that vessel is kind of drained back into two jugs. But my hope, I suppose, is that certainly, I guess, that some of the water from my jug goes into the other person's afterwards. But like, I also think it's important and want to be candid and celebrate, I guess, that I take some of your water with me, and it really kind of nourishes me. And to some extent, like, over time, it becomes unclear to me, like, what is you and what is me, I guess.
Randy, I wanted to ask you one of your questions from your letter, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to know, when you said, you know, I was just thinking of this idea of when you get caught up in trying to do something instead of being, like, doing and being, and kind of these like professional discourses and kind of being mules of capitalism, you know, that we can get stuck in doing versus being. And as you said, like, so I was wondering, like, I'm wondering how you keep yourself open to hearing this call, the return to love.
Oh yeah, like, how do I
keep this call, especially amidst the noise of strong, scrappy living? Like, I wonder how you do that in your work, in this loving work with clients, when you're amidst this scrappy living.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe the scrappy living that I'm thinking of is just like the scrappy living of, like, at least community mental health as it's kind of generally practiced in Seattle, which is, I think I said to someone this week that it, like, consistently squishes you. And then I think, to me, maybe it is like what keeps me open is, like, I know that I'm not going to get everything done, and I know all sorts of stuff that's not possible, and I know ways that I'm, like, inadequate and disorganized, and, like, maybe it gets back to this idea of, like, creating space for yourself, is that, like, okay, I'm going to take time within that machine to, like, make sure I'm interested and, like, get to hear neat things, essentially. And so I think, yeah, I think it's sort of, like, vital to continue to do the work, at least in the setting that I do the work, to just, like, make sure that, like, that I'm interested, I suppose. Like, I mean, I guess it feels a little, like, I don't know, simple, but, like, people are just really neat, and I feel like I'm not doing my job and kind of depriving myself if I don't somehow elicit their neatness, really. So
Thank you.
yeah.
I really resonate with that too. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you for asking.
I know we're just about out of time, but I want to hear from if Luke, if you have a comment on Randy's work.
I mean, I think my comment is just that I guess I see a lot of the practices that I wrote about 12 years ago, you, like, continuing to live out, Randy. So it just felt really beautiful to see your letter. Seeing things like referencing being over doing was something that, like I just saw these parallels between what I was writing about, and you know, and so I just really want to give you a lot of credit for sort of, like, continuing to do this loving practice, as I might have called it, in this sort of, in this structure that doesn't really allow that to happen. I mean, especially at, like, a sort of large hospital system. So I just want to, yeah, I feel like it's an inspiration. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I just want to quickly piggyback on that for just a minute, that a context that maybe others outside of our group don't know about is that, Randy, you work in a giant institution that's affiliated with the University of Washington, which is huge, huge. And the institution at Harborview, I've had a lot of experience over my career with people going in and out of the inpatient psych unit there. And it's been a pretty, in some ways, kind of a stodgy, powerful institutional setting, and at times even abusive to people that get sort of eaten up by the mental health system there. And so one thing that I know is that Randy, when I met you and found out you were working there, and we were talking about it, I couldn't believe you worked there. I wondered, how could you keep your job, by writing these loving letters to people. And then I got to know that you have a certain amount of, it's not that you're hiding, but that you go about your business and get your work done, and you don't break a lot of gigantic rules, but you do have a different sort of practice than the other case managers in the institution. And I just want to acknowledge the effort that it takes for you to balance that, to balance being a part of this big institution and lots of oversight in some ways, but also you have found your space to open up space for clients. And a lot of the people you work with are people that others have thrown away. They've not only cast them to the margins, but they've thrown them on the trash heap. And so I just want to acknowledge that I experience you witnessing or testifying to the stories of these people's lives in very loving ways. And that I think that you have a capacity, a special capacity, to engage with the poetic moments of their lives, and that attending to those moments is a life-giving practice. And I think it's a practice that loves. So thank you. Thank you for caring for my neighbors and friends and family in the communities you work with.
Well, thank you for your water, Marcy. I think this seed has grown a lot because of you. I will also say, I don't know if my parents are watching, but Marcy said I am both testifying and using my English degree. So,
yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt this. It's terrific to meet you, Randy and Luke, and I want to share a couple of quick things, if that's okay. One is I'm struck by this sisterhood centering the men in this conversation, and I just wonder, what, we won't have time to answer this, but what it is that you're caring about that would be that you'd be willing to do that and take that position. And then secondly, I would much rather usually just want to be in the sisterhood somehow. I don't know how that would happen, but with these two, I can imagine a love fraternity that I would want to join. So, so thank you so much for that. Thank you for taking up this hour with your beautiful wave. And we're going to move south to Aptos as one of those spots. Aptos, California, which is a place I spent time as a little boy. So it's a special privilege to be going there. Thank you all. Be well.
Thanks, Stephen.
Bye, love adventures.
Bye.